Now, the New Testament is very different from our culture. It was an agrarian culture. It was very, very poor. There was really a class system of the poor agrarian farmers and goat herders and sheep herders and others, and then the somewhat rich and powerful Sadducees and Pharisees, who are all under the thumb of the Romans. So we'll take a look at this. Now, one of the important things to remember is that Palestine, the Palestine that Jesus grows up in, is very much dominated by both the Roman and Greek cultures, and we'll see that as we go along. Now, one of the things we think about when we think about the New Testament is the religious aspects. The New Testament is a new covenant. It is connected to the Old Covenant of the Hebrew Bible, and we'll see as we go along that Paul and many others put great emphasis on the Hebrew Bible and its importance. The Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, is thought to predict the coming of a Messiah, and Jesus was recognized by many Jewish people as that Messiah, and then later in the Roman and Greek world as the Messiah as well. And so this new covenant is what the New Testament is all about, and it is a covenant between Yahweh, the God of the Jews, and a new group of people known as Christians or followers of the Christ, of Jesus. Christ simply means anointed one, which comes from the term Messiah, which in turn means king or great one. Now, the New Testament was written in Koine Greek. This is common Greek, unlike many of the Greek documents we have, such as the Iliad and many of the Greek philosophers and playwrights that we see. That was written in classical Greek. Koine Greek is common Greek. It's very much, if you think about the newspaper, our newspapers are written in common language so that everyone can understand it, and usually written around an 8th or 9th grade reading level. Koine Greek is very similar. And even though it is a very beautiful language, and Paul is certainly a great Greek writer and rhetorician, he writes it in a manner so that common people can understand it. The New Testament is made up of Gospels. Gospels, or good news, means the history of or the story of. It's telling the story of Jesus. Then we have church history in the book of Acts. Acts is actually a continuation of the Gospel of Luke, and we'll take a look at that later. Also, we have letters and epistles, which are writings that go out to individual churches to instruct them on matters of belief, matters of theology, and matters of ethical living. And we have apocalyptic literature, which is the book of Revelation. And as we go along, I'll make a distinction between the apocalyptic literature, the literature of the end times, the eschaton or eschatology, and the parousia. Those are quite often misunderstood. Now, the New Testament is a very diverse group of people, very diverse writings. It is made up not only of Gentile Christians, but Jewish Christians. The Jewish Christians are the first to come along. Now, they weren't known as Christians to begin with. People who followed Jesus were known as people of the way. And Jewish Christians began the movement, and as they pushed out, they began evangelizing, and particularly Paul and his group, and began to evangelize in Greek cities. And we see a movement of Christianity moving from a Jewish sect into a large religious belief in the Roman Greco world. So we're going to be looking at these aspects a little later on. Now, there's also, you'll encounter a group of people in your textbook called the Community of the Gospel of John. These are thought to be Gnostics. We will make a distinction if that community actually existed or not as we go along as well. Now, the New Testament came along because as the oral traditions and oral words of what happened on that day when Jesus was resurrected, according to the Christians in Jerusalem. Mostly it was oral history. The apostles began telling the story. But eventually people decide, some of the apostles decide that it's time to write down the story so everyone will know it. And also they did this to guard against those who were trying to usurp the Christian ideal or the Christian movement for their own purposes. And so very early on we see the writing of the Gospels. The first writings were actually epistles, and Paul was probably the first one to start writing epistles to churches. We see this continuing on, of course, much later. And then from Paul we also see the apocalyptic writing later on as well. So you will hear at times people say, well, there were many Gospels or many books that did not make it into the New Testament. And that is true. The reason that they did not make it into the New Testament is that the first century church fathers thought that the only thing that was divine and inspired was that, or the words written by an apostle or a follower, a first-hand account from an apostle. For instance, Mark was not an apostle, but he traveled with Peter and he wrote down Peter's stories. This is where we get the Gospel of Mark. Luke was not an apostle, but he was a companion of Paul, who was an apostle. So that's where it comes from. So when you hear people say that there were books left out of the Bible, they were left out because they were not thought to be divinely inspired. They were not thought to be of the importance of what the apostles wrote. Now, also we will deal with the two different ways of viewing the New Testament. Some people view the New Testament as a scholarly work, literature, history, theological work, philosophical work. Other people see it completely as a devotional work. And for many of you, I know that you probably view the New Testament as a scripture, as something important in your life, something you believe, and that's a devotional look at the New Testament. We will be looking at it a little differently. We'll be looking at it from a scholarly point of view, but in no way do I want to take away from your way of looking at it, if you do, from a devotional point of view as well. Now, in the 1700s, after the Enlightenment, German scholarship began looking at the Bible through critical eyes. And critical doesn't mean critical like your aunt may be critical of the way you dress, or someone may be critical of the way you dance. Rather, critical simply means to look at and judge without any bias. And what this means is that critical scholars try to look at the Bible, and this is also what I will refer to as modern scholarship. They try to look at the Bible as a purely scientific endeavor. So they begin with skepticism. They doubt certain things took place. For instance, they doubt that miracles can happen. Why? Well, because they believe everything is contained within the law of nature or physical laws, and those physical laws can't be broken. Now, someone who is traditional would say they can be broken because there was a creator of these laws, and that creator can always dip his toe into the water and cause a ripple. Okay, so we'll be looking at both of those, and particularly looking at the contrast between what are traditional scholars and modern scholars as we take a look at the New Testament. Now, the other thing that goes into studying the New Testament, of course, is our own experience, our heritage, where we come from, whether we attend church or not. All of those also go into our understanding of the New Testament. The Old and New Testament put together, what we refer to as the Bible, is without doubt the most influential book and most influential writings to affect humankind. Nothing has had the effect, nothing has come close to having the effect. And that's why it's important to study both the Old and New Testament. Okay, I'm looking forward to the class. I hope you are as well. We will be looking at many of these issues along the way, and I will be making some distinctions for you, and then we will get into the actual looking at the specific books of the Bible. And I hope this is an enjoyable journey for each one of you. I'm looking forward to the class. Goodbye.